There are completely legitimate reasons in a number of capacities to find out what exactly happened here because it's a serious incident. And what did the left do? They made it about every Republican is somehow guilty of this. And if you deviate or if you just ask any questions about this, you are a bad person, an insurrectionist, white supremacist who's a threat to democracy. I keep saying these people are out of their minds, but this incident and how it would or would not be shared on social media, Clay, this goes to their ability to control the narrative and shut down basic inquiry.
Hey, everybody, we're excited for election night, as many of you are as well. We're going to be having an incredible party in Nashville, and we want you to be able to hang out with us as a part of our VIP family.
So all you got to do is sign up, become a Clay and Buck VIP, and you can stream and join us. Some of your favorite people are going to be there, too. It's going to be an election night bonanza. We'll see you then. This is from the Daily Mail, all right? And, Clay, I want you to tell me what your takeaway, because if you had any questions about any of the details, you were told you're a horrible person. Mystery of Paul Pelosi hammer attack deepens as new police account reveals how Speaker Pelosi's husband calmly opened the door to cops after phoning 911, did not reveal he was in trouble, and then walked back towards the intruder, who then viciously bludgeoned him. Clay, these are now confirmed details from police. This is in one of the largest news gathering websites in the world. What's going on?
Great question. So let's just talk about it in this context as we're working through. Take it outside of Paul Pelosi. Take it outside of this San Francisco incident. If someone broke into your home, you were able to call 911. First of all, most people, I think, Buck, if they were unarmed, if someone broke into their home, would run outside. Okay? That, I think, is what most people would do. If I were in my house right now by myself and I was unarmed and someone broke into my house and I saw a stranger in my house, I would run outside. I wouldn't stay inside with them, number one. Number two, if the police arrived after I had called 911 and I walked and opened the door for them, I would probably let them go in front of me and go behind them and say, there's an intruder in my house. Can you go take care of him? Paul Pelosi didn't do either of those things. Skepticism is not misinformation or disinformation. It's the natural human condition that should exist, I think, when we're confronted with any story where the details don't seem to add up. And so in this scenario, Buck, it's hard for me to come to any conclusion other than Paul Pelosi knew in some way this intruder, because otherwise none of his actions make sense. Now, maybe he was super drunk. Maybe he took an Ambien and he was like not in full capacity and control. I mean, there's always the possibility that he was not in a good mental state, because we should say, according to this report, he was not attacked until after the police arrived, after he opened the door for them, after he walked back to where this other individual was. None of this adds up. And so I would like to see, personally, whether these officers had cameras on them. What does their body camera footage show? What kind of conversations were had? How did this process by which Paul Pelosi ended up being attacked actually ensue? I don't think those are unacceptable questions to ask. I don't think that, given that Joe Biden has given a presidential address arguing that this individual who attacked Pelosi was motivated by his MAGA obsession.
Yeah, the Democrats,
I think these are all very valid questions. They made these situations
made it political right away. They made this a political issue. So they don't get to open that door and then pretend that somebody else opened that door. They made this political right away. But I would note that what you're even saying, skepticism, I would even just say curiosity or inquiry. I mean, what are the details? They're telling us this is a serious event. The guy is being held now, Dupape or Dupape or however you say,
however you pronounce his name.
Yeah, is being held on attempted murder charges against the husband of the Speaker of the House, third in line for the presidency. It's obviously a big deal. It's also, regardless of whether he knew the guy, didn't know, I mean, it's horrible. He's a senior citizen. He's being bludgeoned with a hammer. It's an awful incident. So we need to know the details. The Democrats immediately, because this is who they are, think of this as what is the political advantage of the story? And they can't imagine anyone wanting to get to the facts and get to the truth who doesn't also take that approach. Well, hold on a second. How about the fact that Capitol Police are supposed to be protecting him and police on the scene were there? They each, this is from the police report, Paul Pelosi and the intruder both had a hand on the hammer when officers responded to the home, and then police were yelling, drop the hammer. So looks like, the cops, how was their response? Why Capitol Police, it turns out, weren't monitoring the security cameras in the home. So this guy got it. So there's a whole, even if you just wanted to get all the facts so that you could know whether or not there were security gaps here that would need to be addressed, there are completely legitimate reasons in a number of capacities to find out what exactly happened here, because it's a serious incident. And what did the left do? They made it about every Republican is somehow guilty of this. And if you deviate or if you just ask any questions about this, you are a bad person, an insurrectionist, white supremacist who's a threat to democracy. I keep saying these people are out of their minds, but this incident and how it would or would not be shared on social media, Clay, this goes to their ability to control the narrative and shut down basic inquiry.
Look, this is from NBC Bay Area. I'm reading from NBC Bay Area, the website out there. When officers arrived at the Pacific Heights house in the early morning hours of October 28th, they were unaware whose home it was, and after a knock and announce, the front door was opened by Paul Pelosi, according to an NBC News report citing sources familiar with the events at the home. After answering the door, Pelosi began walking several feet toward the assailant away from police into the foyer, according to the report. It's unclear if Pelosi was already injured or what his mental state was, the sources told NBC News. The officer saw Pelosi and the suspect, who smiled at them, and a struggle ensued as officers saw suspect David DePape strike Pelosi with a hammer, the sources told NBC News. So these are real questions. And I would just point out that they're the same kind of questions, Buck, that you and I on this show asked as all of the Uvalde details came out around that school shooting. Remember, there were tons of details that ended up being untrue that were initially considered to be part of the official narrative of what happened at that school shooting. And it's the job, I believe, of journalists in general to be skeptical and ask questions to try to find out what actually has ensued in order to find yourself able to talk about the facts in question. I just think it's super weird that if you were really afraid of this guy, you would be opening the door to police and then turning and walking back towards him, as opposed to fleeing into the arms of the police and saying, thank you, I'm so glad that you are here. Again, in your house, take it outside of Paul Pelosi. If there was an intruder and the police arrived and the intruder was still there and you opened the door, almost everyone would run outside of that house, run right behind the police, thank them for being there, and say, take care of this guy. Paul Pelosi didn't do that. He opened the door, then turned around and walked back towards this individual. These are legitimate questions that deserve to be asked, and evidently that's when he was severely attacked with the hammer. Now, maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was under the influence of sleeping pills. Maybe there was some mental state that he was not in fully working order, but that needs to come out too.
One of the big lessons we have from the pandemic in particular, I would say, is the moment a Democrat says, shut up and stop asking questions, you need to ask more questions.
Yeah.
The moment they tell you you're not allowed to wonder about this, you need to be digging in and getting at the facts with everything you've got, because this is just in their nature. This is in their mentality. And with this Paul Pelosi thing, I mean, they've been running all these. They dominated the news cycle last weekend with the story. And the story wasn't just that there was an assault and that this is far too common, by the way, that senior citizens are being, how many times have I said old ladies are being bludgeoned in the streets because of idiot Democrat policies? It's true. In this case, it was an old man bludgeoned in his home. And yet it all turned into Trump people are awful. They're making up all these things, but they don't have answers about this yet. And why aren't they asking questions if they're journalists who are supposed to get facts? Because as I've said, they always say, oh, it's some conspiracy about whether Paul, they say, did Paul Pelosi know him or all that? That's one line of inquiry. The other one is, how does this happen to the Speaker of the House's husband with cops who are supposed to be protecting him and then cops on the scene in 2 minutes? I mean, the whole thing is a mess. So how can we not want to know what's going on here?
Why wouldn't they release the body camera footage of the police officers? How many times have we seen right-wing, in quotation marks, individuals arrested where almost instantaneously the body cam footage comes out? Who was the guy, Buck, that they had standing outside of his garage in a long shirt and his underwear, and almost immediately they released that footage to try to humiliate the guy that they had arrested? How many of these abortion protesters, the pro-life protesters who have stood outside of abortion clinics that have been arrested, how many of those have we seen videos of the FBI arriving and arresting those individuals? Certainly, this is a commonplace activity. Why would there not be a public interest in being able to see what was said and what those officers' body cams show in San Francisco? I mean, these are not crazy questions. These are legitimate questions. And I would point out, Buck, you're 100% right. The more people say you aren't allowed to ask these questions, the more you should be pushing and asking those questions, because it makes it seem like there is something to hide and that the story is not as we would have expected. I would bet that there will be more details come out about this after the election, and it will emerge that this was not. I still think it's strange that a 42-year-old nudist who lives in a house with BLM signs in Berkeley, California.
I think he lives in a bus, Clay.
In a bus? Okay. I mean, this guy's not sane, right? He's insane. Let's say that. But do you think, like, hey, who was most likely to be big in the MAGA camp? 43-year-old Berkeley nudist? 42-year-old middle-aged Berkeley bearded nudist? That's not who I would go with, a wheelhouse MAGA supporter. So I think this guy's clearly got mental issues. But what in the world was going on that Paul Pelosi was not fleeing when police arrived? Why was he still inside the house with this guy?
I don't think we've got a lot of Berkeley nudist protester commies listening right now. But if we got a few,
welcome.
Possible. Welcome, yeah.
It's a sign of the strength and power and reach of the show if you guys are also listening. But I wouldn't say that's our base. And I certainly wouldn't say that's the MAGA base.
Not our base.
Middle-aged nudist. First of all, not a very big base. Might be Nancy Pelosi's base. It's not a very big base to start with. Just doesn't feel like any of these details are adding up. And asking those questions is not unacceptable. It's actually what skeptical media and journalists should be doing.